The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, sending golden droplets across my new Jimmy Choos. My Aunt Victoria stood frozen, her perfectly manicured hand still suspended in midair where the glass had been moments before. "You did what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the classical music drifting through the Meridian Contemporary Gallery. I smiled, taking a slow sip from my own glass. I said, "We've acquired the Whitmore Gallery. The board voted unanimously last week. We'll be closing it down by the end of the month. Redundancy, you understand. The contemporary art scene in this city simply doesn't need two galleries showcasing the same tired roster of has-beens." The color drained from her face, transforming her from intimidating art world gatekeeper to something far more satisfying, vulnerable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the sweetness of this moment, you need to know how it all began. 3 years ago, I stood in this very gallery, though it belonged to someone else then, clutching my portfolio like a life raft. Fresh out of art school, full of dreams and what my professors called raw, undeniable talent, I'd made the mistake of mentioning my plans at our family's Thanksgiving dinner. "Sienna's going to be a professional artist," my mother had announced proudly, beaming at me across the table laden with turkey and family politics. Aunt Victoria, seated at the head of the table in what had been my grandmother's chair, had laughed. Not a polite chuckle or an encouraging giggle, but a full-throated, wine-fueled cackle that made my cousin Marcus look up from his phone. "Professional? Oh, honey," she'd said, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "Your little paintings are sweet. Really, they are. But professional? The art world isn't a charity for dilettantes with trust funds and delusions of grandeur." "I don't have a trust fund," I'd said quietly, my face burning. "No, which makes it even more tragic." She'd turned to address the table like she was giving a TED Talk. "Do you know how many artists I see every week? Fresh-faced kids who think because mommy hung their finger paintings on the fridge, they're the next Basquiat? Sienna, darling, your work is amateur. Stick to hobbies. Maybe take up yoga or pottery, something less embarrassing for the family." My father had tried to intervene. "Victoria, that's enough. I'm doing her a favor, James. Someone needs to tell her the truth before she wastes years chasing an impossible dream. The Whitmore Gallery represents serious artists. Artists with vision, with connections, with that indefinable something. And sweetie," she'd looked directly at me, "you simply don't have it." I'd left early, driving home through tears, my portfolio still unopened in the back seat. For 6 months after that dinner, I almost gave up. I waited tables at a trendy bistro downtown, coming home too exhausted to paint. My canvases gathered dust in the corner of my studio apartment, accusatory in their blankness. But anger, I discovered, is a powerful muse. It started with a single painting, a large canvas depicting a woman made of shattered champagne flutes, each shard reflecting a different version of herself. Some showed her young and hopeful, others bitter and sharp-edged. I titled it Thanksgiving. Then came more. A series exploring family dynamics through the lens of predatory birds. Abstract pieces that translated rejection into violent swirls of color. I painted through my shifts, showing up to work with acrylic under my fingernails. I painted until my wrists ached and my eyes burned. And slowly, people began to notice. First, it was Dimitri, a regular at the bistro who happened to run a small gallery in the arts district. He'd seen me sketching during my break and asked to see more. His gallery was tiny, barely more than a converted warehouse space, but he offered me a spot in a group show. Opening night, 12 people showed up. Aunt Victoria wasn't among them, though I'd sent her an invitation out of spite. But Margot Steele was. Margot Steele, collector, philanthropist, and more importantly, Victoria's former best friend before a bitter falling out over a man neither of them ended up marrying. She bought 3 pieces that night and introduced me to everyone as the most exciting emerging artist in the city. Word spread through the art world's interconnected web of gossip and intrigue. Within a year, I'd had 3 solo shows, each more successful than the last. The city's premier art magazine ran a feature, Sienna Morrison, Raw Talent Refined. They called my work visceral, uncompromising, and a fresh voice in contemporary art. But success, I learned, is the best revenge only if your target knows about it. The invitation to the Whitmore Gallery's annual gala came as a shock. Aunt Victoria's assistant called to confirm my attendance, her voice professionally neutral as she explained that Ms. Whitmore would like to extend an olive branch. I wore red, a calculated choice, the color of power, of blood, of all the paintings she'd dismissed. The Whitmore Gallery occupied a restored bank building in the financial district, all marble columns and soaring ceilings. I'd driven past it countless times, each viewing a small torture. Now, walking up those steps felt like approaching a battlefield. Victoria waited at the entrance, resplendent in her signature black, her smile as sharp as her cheekbones. "Sienna, darling. How wonderful you could make it. Air kisses, the scent of her perfume. Chanel No. 5, always Chanel No. 5. I've been following your little successes. How marvelous for you. Little successes." The diminutive stung exactly as intended. The evening was an exercise in subtle cruelty. She introduced me as her niece who dabbles in art, mentioned repeatedly that family connections had opened doors for me, and steered me away from every important collector who showed interest in my work. "You understand," she murmured as she guided me toward the bar and away from Harrison Blackwell, whose foundation had just announced a major acquisition fund. "These people are used to a certain caliber. I wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself." I left after an hour, my hands shaking with rage. But in the car, scrolling through my phone to distract myself, I saw an email that changed everything. Nathaniel Cross wanted to meet with me. The Nathaniel Cross, venture capitalist, art collector, and the man who'd transformed 3 struggling galleries into the Cross Contemporary Art Network, the most influential gallery group on the East Coast. "I've been watching your career with interest," Nathaniel said over coffee in his penthouse office. "The city spread out below us, a kingdom of glass and possibility. Your work has something visceral, uncompromising." The same words from the magazine review. I wondered if he'd actually seen my paintings or just read about them. As if reading my mind, he gestured to the wall behind me. I turned and nearly spilled my coffee. "Thanksgiving," hung there, my shattered woman presiding over his conference table. "I bought it from Dimitri last month," he explained. "Paid 3 times asking price to ensure I got it. It reminds me of my own family. Beautiful and cutting." We talked for 2 hours. About art, about vision, about the changing landscape of contemporary galleries. About how the old guard, he mentioned no names, but his eyes flickered meaningfully, was holding back fresh talent in favor of safe, established artists whose best work was behind them. "I'm acquiring the Meridian Contemporary," he said finally. "The owner wants to retire. I'd like you to be my first featured artist. More than that, I'd like you to help shape the gallery's direction. Your generation's voice, not mine." I thought of Victoria's condescending smile, her little successes, her gatekeeping disguised as protection. "I'm interested," I said. "Tell me more." The next 18 months were a whirlwind. The Meridian Contemporary reopened under Nathaniel's leadership with my solo exhibition, Family Dynamics. Every piece sold opening night. The reviews were spectacular. The Times called it a brutal, beautiful meditation on the ties that bind and strangle. Victoria didn't attend, but she sent flowers. White lilies, funeral flowers. The card read, "Congratulations on your moment." My moment stretched into moments. A museum acquisition. A documentary feature. International exhibitions. And through it all, I made sure Victoria knew about every success, every accolade. I sent her catalogs, reviews, invitation after invitation. She never came, but I knew she was watching. Because the art world is small, and gossip travels fast. I heard from mutual acquaintances about her comments. How I was a flash in the pan. How Nathaniel was using me for publicity. How the work was shocking for shock's sake. But I also heard other things. How the Whitmore Gallery was struggling. How her stable of established artists was being poached by newer galleries. How collectors were calling her vision dated and safe. When Nathaniel first mentioned acquiring the Whitmore Gallery, I thought he was joking. "Victoria would never sell," I said. "That gallery is her identity." "Everyone has a price," he replied. "And between you and me, she's hemorrhaging money. Those established artists she loves? They're expensive to maintain and not selling like they used to. The building alone costs a fortune. She's been looking for a buyer who will maintain the gallery's legacy." A thought formed, delicious and dark. What if the buyer promised to maintain it, then changed their mind? Nathaniel studied me over his whiskey. That would be cruel. Yes, I agreed. It would be. The negotiations took 6 months. Shell companies and intermediaries, lawyers and contracts. Victoria never knew Nathaniel was behind the offer, and she certainly didn't know about my involvement. The purchasing company promised to maintain the Whitmore Gallery's prestigious reputation, to honor its artists' contracts, to preserve its legacy. All lies, of course. but beautifully legal lies. The night the sale finalized, I opened a bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon, the same label Victoria served at her galas, and painted until dawn. The piece showed a bird of prey circling a gilded cage, patient and precise. We waited a month after the acquisition before announcing the closure. Long enough for Victoria to feel secure, to tell people about the wonderful transition, to believe her legacy was safe. I insisted on delivering the news personally. Which brings us back to the shattered champagne flute, the shocked expression, the perfect reversal of fortune. "You can't do this," Victoria said, finding her voice. "The contracts have been thoroughly reviewed by our legal team. The Whitmore Gallery's inventory will be absorbed into our collection. Artists who fit our vision will be offered representation. The building will be renovated as an educational center for emerging artists, the Meridian Foundation. Tuition-free, focused on artists without family connections or trust funds." The barb landed. Her face flushed. "This is revenge," she spat. "Petty, childish revenge." "No," I corrected. "Revenge would be leaving you with nothing. This is business. The contemporary art scene in this city doesn't need gatekeepers who confuse cruelty with criticism, who mistake nepotism for merit. It needs fresh voices, diverse perspectives, actual talent." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I made you. My rejection pushed you to become better. You should be thanking me." I laughed, not cruelly, but with genuine amusement. "You didn't make me. You nearly broke me. The only thing you taught me was that success is the best response to someone who tells you you're not good enough." "I'll ruin you," she whispered. "I still have influence. Collectors, critics, they listen to me." "They used to," I agreed. "But influence is like art. It requires constant reinvention. And you, Aunt Victoria, have been showing the same tired pieces for too long." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, I almost forgot. You're welcome to apply for representation with us. Submit your proposal like any other gallery would. We'll give it all due consideration." Her voice cracked. "Sienna, please. This gallery is my life's work." For a moment, I felt a flicker of something, pity perhaps, or the ghost of family loyalty. Then I remembered Thanksgiving, remembered the tears in my car, remembered 6 months of almost giving up on my dreams because someone who should have supported me chose to cut me down instead. "Then you should have treated it, and the artists who dreamed of showing here, with more respect," I said. I left her standing among the shattered glass, the classical music still playing, a room full of art that would soon be only memory. The Meridian Foundation opened 6 months later. The renovation transformed the stuffy bank building into a light-filled space where emerging artists could learn, create, and exhibit without the barriers that had almost stopped me. Victoria applied for representation. Her proposal was professional, thorough, and desperate. We sent a form rejection, the same template the Whitmore Gallery had used for thousands of hopeful artists over the years. She showed up at the Foundation's opening gala uninvited. Security was prepared to escort her out, but I waved them off. She looked older, diminished somehow, her signature black replaced with forgettable beige. "The critics raved about your latest exhibition," she said stiffly. "The Times called it a mature evolution of an important voice." "Thank you," I replied, matching her formal tone. She hesitated then. "I was wrong. About your talent. About your potential. I see that now." It was the closest to an apology I'd ever get from her. I could have been gracious. Could have offered her something, a teaching position, a curatorial role, anything to heal the family rift. Instead, I smiled and said, "Your acknowledgement is noted. The bar is open, and I believe you know the way out." She left without another word. I haven't seen her since, though I hear she gives private art tours now, her voice less certain when she explains what makes something real art. The painting from that dawn after the acquisition, the bird of prey circling the gilded cage, hangs in my studio now. Not for sale, no matter the offer. It reminds me that success isn't just about talent or hard work or even connections. Sometimes it's about patience, about turning rejection into fuel, about knowing when to circle and when to strike. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about the exquisite satisfaction of hearing your worst critic admit they were wrong, even if it comes too late to matter. The Meridian Foundation has launched 12 careers in its first year. Young artists, diverse voices, dreamers who might have given up if someone had told them they weren't good enough at the wrong moment. We give them space, support, and most importantly, respect. Because that's what was always missing from Victoria's kingdom. The understanding that art isn't about gatekeeping, but about opening doors. Not about crushing dreams, but about nurturing them, even when they're still rough and unformed and amateur. Every Thanksgiving now, my family gatherings are quieter. Victoria's chair sits empty. But in studios across the city, artists who might have quit are painting through the night, turning their anger and hope and ambition into something beautiful and brutal and entirely their own. And that, more than any revenge, is the real victory.